Hello, my friends. Today, I'm going to talk to you about a kind of an important debate that I feel that we should have, which is it ethical to have pets at all? I recorded a video recently where I was talking about the ethics of having parrots and birds as pets, but today I want to talk about more common pets, even though parrots are pretty common as pets, but I mean the number one and two common pets, depending on where you live, are cats and dogs. So, is it ethical? Is it moral to have a dog or a cat as a pet? And I think it's an interesting conversation to have because dogs and cats, I believe, are the only animals that would choose to live with us if they had a choice. Dogs, because they're super, super social, super friendly, and they put us in their pack dynamic. And cats, because they're homebodies. So, for example, my kids live with their mom, and they come here sometimes. And when they're with their mom, sometimes. I made it sound like it was a very rare event. Don't worry, they come here often, and when they're with their mom, they have a cat that was living with them before they moved, living at that place before they moved in, and so they got the cat as kind of like a bonus. So clearly, the cat has chosen the place, and the people are just like an additional thing for the cat, you know. So the the problem when we talk about pets, one of the major dilemmas, and the thing that I mentioned in my award-winning video about should you keep birds as pets, is that birds generally don't have the same choice as, and like dogs and cats don't have choices also, but if a bird was given freedom, the bird would probably fly away. Unless it's a pigeon, but we're not talking about pigeons. Actually, we are talking about pigeons. We're talking about all pets, cats and dogs and such. So, as I said in that video, I think that there are three categories we need to consider if we want to think if something is moral or immoral. The first category is need. And when I talk about these categories, I'm talking about things that affect us and also the being that we're interacting with. So, need, what do I need? Those are the things like food, shelter, companionship, intellectual stimulation, physical activity, those things. What do I want? So, like, I want a cheeseburger. Is that necessarily the best option for me? I want a big house. Do I need a big house? And I want a Dalmatian, right? So those are wants. And then harm. So if I get a cheeseburger one day, it's fine. If I get a cheeseburger every day, actually, it also might be fine. But if I get a cheeseburger and fries and a big Coke, then probably I'm going to develop some health problems down the line. So that's going to harm me. And if we're talking about pets, then what kind of harm can be done when you have a pet? So obviously, there's like the extreme of animal abuse and neglect, and that unfortunately does happen a lot. But let's not talk about so dramatic things because those are not really the crux of my argument. And actually, I don't really have an argument. I don't I don't know per se what's better, having pets or not having pets. And I think in an extreme situation, extreme, like if we go the extreme point of view, we could say that not having pets is the best, most ethical option because the pets can never consent. And by that definition, it's kind of like slavery. You are forcing these animals to be a pet. And that might seem a little bit extreme, but I think people really do think that way. So I was at work today and I was overhearing a conversation that somebody in the next team was having where they got a pet, they got a puppy, and they said that the puppy had like emotional problems and they were using a cage to kind of like control the dog. And when I was growing up, dogs would never be put in cages, right? They would live with you and they would like live their own lives. And there was like controversies because people would keep their dogs tied up outside, like in a dog house. And that would be the thing that we would argue about. And I don't know, like, I'm not an expert in dog psychology, but the arguments that they were having at work, they were like, well, it's not a person. So are you saying that it would be natural is a bad word, and I don't like that argument from nature. But if you think about dog psychology, a dog is not going to love being put in a cage. It's just not going to like it, right? And maybe there's a way that the door of the cage is open and that place is just the dog's place, but it feels really like having a parrot, right? That you're confining the dog in that space. And again, I'm not an expert in dog psychology. Maybe you can enlighten me, like, what are the benefits of dogs being in cages? And like, another person at work left the dog in a cage when they went to work. And maybe I'm imagining that the cage is really, really, really small. But if you can't move around and like you're keeping the dog in the cage because you're worried the dog is gonna like destroy your apartment or something, like maybe you shouldn't have a dog then, right? Because that goes back to these three things: need, want, and harm. So your want to have a pristine apartment is harming another living creature. And I think that's wrong, right? I think in that case, you shouldn't have a dog. And maybe this is going to be a bit controversial, but I don't think most people who live in apartments, unless you have like a huge apartment, should have a dog, right? I think you need at least a yard that you can go out, that you can let the dog out, that the dog can run around in and have fun without walking the dog, you know? So I got a little bit mad about the cage thing, but I think I think we need to balance the our need for companionship, and it is a need, right? And we don't always like you see these little old ladies who have these dogs or these cats, and those animals are hopefully getting something from that person, like it's a mutually beneficial relationship. And that person is getting companionship, which is really, really important for everybody, not just old people, but like, yeah. So the idea of having pets is this very, very complicated thing, right? Because we we understand that they are emotional creatures and they have their own interior thoughts and things now. And this is crazy, but I remember when I went to university, oh, so many years ago, I had a conversation with a guy, and I don't know why, but we were talking about animals. And I said, yeah, animals can feel emotion. And he's like, no, 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 no. They're just biological machines. They don't feel anything. And what's crazy is like that was a popular opinion back then. Like that was the common opinion, and I wasn't really arguing from science, but I was just arguing from common sense. And now science has proven that yes, dogs are a lot smarter than even like we thought. They can recognize. I think somebody did an experiment with a dog that was able to recognize 350 words and objects. And so basically, there was a big pile of objects, and the person said, "Hey, go get me the whatever, the red doll." Maybe not the red doll, because, colorblind and stuff, but the dog was able to retrieve whatever the guy said. So I think that science is proving and showing and doing experiments to understand non human minds. And I think I'm kind of like rambling a little bit, but I just want to express how difficult this conversation is because I don't think that it's black and white. Like, I think that there are some animals that shouldn't be pets, like parrots. I don't think that parrots and birds, most birds except for pigeons, should not be pets because people cannot provide them the conditions that give them the best possible life. And maybe I'll just go over my opinions about what I think about different animals. So dogs, I think, make great not only pets but also service animals, and I think that the relationship that people have with them is usually beneficial for both parties. But I think when you treat a dog like an object and not like a unique individual, you're really damaging the relationship. You're really harming that other living thing. And so there's multiple examples of like this. The caging that I talked about, physically abusing the dog and making it live in conditions that are not great for it, like living in a small apartment. And I'm talking about bigger dogs that need bigger space. I think a small dog in an apartment could work as long as give it exercise, intellectual stimulation, and all of that stuff. And like a lot of people don't even like play with their dogs after they're puppies, which is really, really weird. So I think it would be good to that everyone trains their dog, even if they don't necessarily need it, because it's giving them something to do. It's giving them some intellectual stimulation. Like these are creatures that can be police dogs, they can be drug dogs, they can be seeing eye dogs, guide dogs, they can alert if somebody is having an epileptic attack. They're such amazing animals. And if you're just allowing them to vegetate and you're not giving them any intellectual stimulation, then of course they're going to misbehave. The other kind of like, apart from all of that stuff that I mentioned, the other big thing, the big harm that people do to dogs is connected to before they're even born, which is all of these like breeds, purebred dogs. I think on the whole, it's a scam and detrimental to those dogs. Like in that conversation that I mentioned, the one guy got the dog from a shelter, which is great. And the other guy was saying, oh, yeah, you have to be careful because, it's better to get a dog from a breeder because then that the dog's been trained really well and won't have any issues. Like, what? Like, dogs from breeders are not necessarily better behaved than dogs from shelters. And in a ideal world, you get your dog from a family where the dog had like babies and, like that, but that's not the ideal world, right? The best is that, and the second best is shelters, and that's it. Because getting a dog from a breeder means that firstly, it's a commercial enterprise. So basically, they are trying to make money on living things. And that's another whole conversation. But they're trying to make money on living things, and they're trying to, uh, get you to purchase this idea of exclusivity and, German Shepherds for, I don't know, tens of thousands of dollars, but actually because they suit the platonic ideal of what that breed should look like now. They have back problems, and German Shepherds are not even like that's the tip of the iceberg. You have these really cute dogs with a smushed face. They can't breathe properly, their skulls are too big, and they can't give birth naturally because their uh, cervix, I guess, is not wide enough. So we've done horrible things to these dogs, and we should stop. That is definitely uh, in that harm category. We are harming another living being, a whole category of living beings, because of what we want, not because of what we need. Because a lot of these breeds, they were originally, kind of bred for specific purposes, like hunting, like I think terriers were kind of bred to kill rats, and we don't need that for the most part anymore. So we don't need these breeds. And instead of allowing them to go extinct, and it's weird to say because they're not actually extinct, because the dogs will just be dogs. They'll be like more natural. They won't have smudged up faces or anything. Yeah, we don't need them. Like nobody needs Dalmatians. I'm sorry to the people who love Dalmatians. And nobody needs Irish setters. They they want dogs, right? So that's a horrible thing that we do. And I've been focusing on dogs for the most part, but let's shift the focus a little bit to cats, and if it's moral and ethical to have cats as pets. So, I think the issue with cats, as I mentioned, is that cats will choose a place and the people will be connected to the place. So they're like happy in that place and they're happy with those people, but the people could change and then they'd still be happy because they're happy in that place. So cats are loyal more to the 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 locus, the situation, the sitio, the place, rather than the actual uh, people usually. Although cats, and I say that, and I kind of have like an anti-cat bias, but I really need to like squash that because there are these great videos on the internet of cats doing these like amazing things to protect babies. Like I saw one where a baby was about to fall down a flight of stairs because her mother was sleeping and there's no gate on the stairs, which is crazy. But anyway, the cat saw this and stood next to the stairs so the baby didn't fall down the stairs. There was another thing where there was like a toddler who was playing in this driveway and this random dog came running out of nowhere to try and attack the kid, and out of nowhere the kid's cat came and like did a ramming motion into the dog and the dog ran away. Like I think that cats, I mean, some animals will do this, but cats don't have any sense of proportion, right? They still think that they're lions, right? So I saw another one where it was like a bear that had come to somebody's, I think, like one of those screen doors. And the bear was like sniffing inside, and the cat was like, "Let me at him! Let me at him!" And the bear ran away because the bear did not want to deal with that. So cats have a lot of advantages. And of course, dogs would also protect you, I think, from that. Some dogs would, some dogs wouldn't. I mean, they're individuals, right? So when we talk about the problems with having cats, I think there's two main things. One is connected to the well-being of the cats themselves, and the other is connected to the well-being of the environment that you have the cats in. So the first thing is that a lot of people just have a cat and they just leave it and they don't interact with the cat apart from like petting it. But cats also need this intellectual stimulation. I think I saw some video where the guy was recommending that you spend, I mean, don't take this for gospel. Do your own research, because as much as I'm not a dog expert, I'm also not a cat expert, but they had this thing where they were like he was saying that you should play with your cat for like 15 minutes and 15 minutes a day, and then it will be tired and it will be happy and all of that. And I think a lot of people don't do that, which is crazy. But, kind of makes sense, because when I was growing up, pets were a nice part of our lives, but we didn't actually consider very much. Apart from like the food and the exercise, we didn't really consider very much what they needed. Um, yeah. And so that's one thing. And I think the other thing is that cats are very good predators. And because they're very good predators, they can have like a devastating impact on the local environment if they're not properly supervised. So, this is maybe the most controversial thing I'm going to say in this video is I think that all cats should be indoor cats unless you can keep your cat outdoor. You can supervise. So basically, indoor cats, but you supervise their time outdoors. And that's for two reasons. One, because outdoor cats live shorter and more violent lives than indoor cats do. That's because they fight with other cats. They might get into fights with foxes. Um, they're not going to win that fight. Or in other places, coyotes or maybe even wolves. I don't know. Bears, depending on where you live, if that's a problem. But also, they just get into accidents, like they get run over by a car, or they fall off a high place, or something falls into them. So, like, you have this responsibility for this being that's dependent on you, not only for food and intellectual stimulation, but also like for physical protection, right? You should have to protect your cat. That cat would protect your children, so you should protect your cat. And the other thing that people think is a little bit hippy dippy, but it's not, as I kind of hinted at before, is that cats will devastate the natural environment. They will completely eat all of the small animals and small little birdies if you let them. There was a guy who got assigned to some kind of like lighthouse on this little island that didn't have any cats or natural predators, and he got two cats, and within 5 years all of those little animals and little birdies were gone, because he was like, oh, how cute, you're killing this thing and bringing it to me. Because cats don't kill necessarily because they're hungry. They just kill because you're an incompetent hunter, I heard. So yeah, you can either, some people walk their cats on leashes. Some people create these like catio type things if you have a house like that. I think also you can just like have a fenced yard and then go outside with your cat like you would a dog. The cat could climb up, but hopefully it comes back, and then you just let it in. But don't like let it out and then let it in, because it's getting into misadventures. And I've heard that that's kind of controversial, because some people, like for example in Europe, think that cats don't actually like kill a lot of small animals. They do. It's just they're not aware of it because they don't really understand the natural environment that they live in. So I'll give you an interesting fact, which is why cats can be so dangerous, especially around now that I'm talking in spring, because birds do this thing where they have the little chicks in the nest, right? And then when the chicks, this is also a PCA, it's like a public service announcement. When the chicks get a little bit bigger, like imagine the nest is in the tree, the chicks are a little bit bigger, and then they'll fall out of the nest when they're almost able to fly and fend for themselves. And the adult birds will they'll so the little birds will be walking around the bottom of the tree. Those are called fledglings. So they'll in a few days they'll be able to fly. And a lot of people they think these birds, they have feathers, they look like kind of like miniature almost adult birds. They're not like the chicks without feathers. So sometimes those fall out of the nest. But these ones are a little bit older and they're moving around and they're more independent. You don't need to save them. You don't need to rescue them. It's a completely normal part of bird development. So these chicks are very vulnerable to cats. And you might think, well, who cares if a cat is eating a chick? Less pigeons. No, these are not pigeons. These are you know, beautiful songbirds like blackbirds and robins and great tits and blue tits and marsh tits and all the tits, you know, and sparrows and chickadees, which is a kind of tit, but in North America. Why don't you call it a tit? I don't know. So, yeah, if you have a wild roaming cat during this period of time, it's going to be devastation because those birds, they don't really fly very well yet. So they're not going to be able to escape from a cat. And if you're wondering what that actually looks like in practice, I went, you know, I'm a bird watcher, so I went bird watching last year in this place. It was like a park, and there were, I forgot what kind of bird it was, but maybe it was a field fair. Anyway, their chicks were fledgling, and I could have, so they had maybe 4 or 5 in this park area, and it was an area where they weren't mowing the grass. It was more like a little park forest kind of thing, but very, very small. So if I wanted to, as a person who's not a natural born hunter, I could have caught all 5 of them, you know. So a cat can do it like that, you know, snuff out those lives. And you might think, well, yes, cats need to hunt. So what's the problem with them hunting? Well, you're doing more harm again to actually creatures that are sentient in a way. I mean, I don't think birds are having great philosophical discussions, and I don't think that those little birds that I'm talking about have the intellectual capacity of your cat. But, you know, don't sleep on the bird intelligence, because, you know, pigeons can count, you know. Pigeons understand a lot of stuff, and they can navigate a lot better than your cat or your dog can. I mean, maybe that's like an instinctive thing, but we don't know actually. So, yeah, birds are wonderful, cats are wonderful, dogs are wonderful. And I've been rambling, but I guess the point is that having pets is not something that is a right. It's a privilege and it's a responsibility. Oh, and if I can ramble a bit more about one thing that I want to talk about, which is the idea that you are a dog mom or a cat mom or a dog dad or a cat dad. Please stop saying that. That's disrespectful. You're more like a dog friend, you know? I mean, in the extreme way, you could say you're a dog slave owner, but I wouldn't go that extreme because, as I said, I think dogs might choose humans, and they did thousands of years ago, and that's why they're dogs. So, but you're not their parent. I think that's so offensive. Not just to real human parents, although it is pretty offensive, because it's more like you are their brother or sister if you want to use a family bond, or you are their friend. What happened to that? Wasn't man's best friend good enough? Person's best friend? I think that's pretty good. Like, your dog is not your child. And I think, I don't want to overanalyze this, but I think when people treat their animals like children, it can actually cause a lot of problems because then they don't understand the psychology of those animals and they try and use human psychology on an animal. And you have to approach the dog on its own terms. You have to approach a cat on its own terms. Don't go like trying to pet the cat all the time. It's not going to like that. Ignore the cat. The cat will come to you when it's ready. That's what cats do. Dogs, let them jump on you. I don't know if that's good advice or not. But anyway, you know what I mean. Like, you have to try to have a respect for the animals as animals and not just things, basically, is the conclusion. So, should people have pets? Yeah, I guess, but you need to balance your needs and their needs, your wants and their wants, and try not to harm yourself or harm them, and it will be fine. I think maybe one last thing is the idea of exotic animals and in zoos and stuff. And I would say if you can give an animal a condition that it would have in nature, then there's no problem having that animal as a sort of pet. I think people have these like arrowhead frogs, and they're not poisonous because they need to eat something in their environment to become poisonous. But if you have a terrarium, these frogs are like this. So for them, it's like a natural-esque habitat. But on the other hand, if you have a giant boa constrictor and you live in a normal-sized house, that's weird. That's unethical, I think. And also, this is a little bit odd, but also people who have cows as pets in their houses. I mean, I think you could have a cow as a pet if you wanted to. Like you can have a horse as a pet, but it needs a lot more space than your house, you know. So yeah, those are my thoughts, my rambling thoughts about having pets.